bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Varennes, also known as Ricky Varennes. And of course, I'm going to say it, another great interview with another great guest, a returning guest, Alex Krainer. He's an author. He's a thinker, researcher. He was on before to talk about one of his books, Grand Deception, the truth about Bill Browder, the Magnitsky Act, and anti-Russian sanctions. So if you want to hear about that book, check out the last podcast I did with him. And always super fascinating conversations. He's just, his perspective, his opinions, everything's well thought out. I mean, he goes into his perspective and the pros and cons and the flaws of socialism and capitalism in a way that is so thought-provoking and so interesting. So I hope you guys really pay attention to that part, because I know I'm going to have to re-listen to it. And just a really fun conversation. And I know some people are having coronavirus and COVID-19 discussion fatigue, and you're just sick of hearing about it. But all the things we talk about on this show, I feel like are relevant. They are important. But yet it's not an overwhelming discussion about the coronavirus and whatnot. So hopefully this is a nice little change. I mean, I just had a MMA fighter on who's a Portuguese MMA fighter, and fascinating story and his perspective on how to look at things in a positive light, and how regardless what happens in life, he always, his mental strength to be optimistic constantly, and how that helps him with succeeding the things he wants to succeed. Super fascinating conversation. I mean, it was such a fun conversation, and it was a conversation similar to this one, where I think a lot of people can take a lot away from. I'm having a problem talking because I just did an hour and a half podcast, so I'm struggling to continue talking, believe it or not. But just a fascinating conversation, and these conversations like I had with Alex and that one that I had with Pedro Carvalho, they were just, they're so much fun, because we're talking about personal experiences and perspectives and opinions and things that really affect our everyday life and the way we perceive our everyday life and the world around us. So it's really, I love those type of conversations as much as I love like my recent guests, Whitney Webb and Dr. Kendra Becker, who we just did basically some episodes on current events and what's going on in the world, and it's more information driven. Those are equally as important. But the nice thing I love about this podcast is that I feel like it's a good mixture of both, some personal experiences, some personal stories, and also tons of, I think, informative discussions that I think people can learn from. So, but I also think, like I said, I think these conversations are important, and you're also learning stuff in these conversations. And so today is no different. Very good mix of information and personal perspectives, and those are some of my favorite discussions. So with that said, everybody who's supporting the show, truly appreciate it. Even if you're only contributing $1, I don't care. I truly appreciate you doing that. Even $1 is something that a lot of people don't want to contribute right now, because times are tough and money is tight for all of us. So I truly, truly appreciate it. I support shows like, I've been supporting James Corbett forever, because I'm a huge fan, and I feel like I owe it to him for so much of what I've learned from his site and stuff. And I know a lot of you guys feel the same way with my show, and that's why you're contributing. And not to put myself on James Corbett's level, because I consider him like the gold standard of alternative media, and I think Whitney Webb also, in regards to research, she's really become like a gold standard in regards to research on so many different topics. And so I truly appreciate it. But I also appreciate everybody who's sharing, and I kind of feel like a small business where I kind of stay in business not based on marketing, but based on word of mouth, because so many people are just telling their friends and sharing my show with people and sharing my show on their social media accounts that I'm starting to see this growth. And like I said in my last intro, I love the fact that this is kind of a sample of what my life could be if one day I do get enough financial support to do this full time. And I would love, that's still my dream. And like many of you guys listening, we got to keep working and keep going at it and keep doing it. And hopefully those things will come true. And I'm passionate, as you can tell. And regardless, like I've told you guys many times in the past, regardless if I can financially do this as a job or not, I'm still going to do it, because I started it for a purpose of spreading these conversations, and that's always going to be my purpose, of spreading thought-provoking conversations, hopefully to listeners and myself grow throughout this journey of having interesting people on and having interesting conversations. And that's way more important than any financial gain, and hopefully the rest will fall in place eventually. But if not, I'm not going to be heartbroken, because I'm fulfilled in what I'm doing now, and just being connected with so many awesome fans and listeners and people who are constantly giving me positive support, telling me that they love the show or they love this specific episode or whatnot, which really is a great motivator for myself. And yeah, so I mean, one of you can just count that as one of the many Ricky rants, which hopefully in the near future I'll be doing one again, because I think people actually enjoyed my last one on the coronavirus. So that's it, guys. Stay sane, stay safe. Hopefully everybody is using this podcast in a way to kind of get through the boredom or the craziness or the hysteria. If it can help with any of that, make the time go by, and maybe just have something enjoyable in a world that seems like all the enjoyable stuff has been extracted from our lives, then it's doing its job, because podcasts did that for me and still do that for me, and hopefully I can continue doing that for you guys. So that's it. Enjoy the conversation, a great conversation. I'll put the links to his books and his social media accounts and all that stuff in the show description on our YouTube channel. Any guest that calls in using video, Alex didn't today, but many guests do call in using video. You can actually see the guests and I have the conversation on YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6. If you guys are bored, also I have a documentary YouTube playlist. So you can go on our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, or look up the Ripple Effect podcast, and you can see the documentary playlist. Things are constantly being pulled off, unfortunately. So watch those documentaries while they're still there. They're not all documentaries. I completely agree with everything, but I think they're all worth watching, and they're all thought-provoking. And so if you're bored and you're looking for something to watch, definitely check those out. And if you have any suggestions for documentaries that are on YouTube to throw in that playlist, let me know. And that's it. So keep sharing the show, keep reviewing the show, keep telling your friends and all that stuff. And together we can hopefully grow the show and keep doing this. I think you guys can tell by all these hours of conversations and all these hours of me talking that what you're listening to is a real human being who really just, much like yourself, is just super curious and just seeking some answers and some truth in the world, and trying to leave the world a little better than we received it. So I think together we can all do that. I've said it over and over again, and I'll say it again. I truly believe in the ripple effect, and it's not just the ripple effect that this show's creating, but it's a ripple effect that all you guys who are listening are creating by sharing these discussions and just being outspoken about what you believe in, and regardless if you're going against the grain or somebody might look at you differently. And I think the world needs people like that. So for now, I will hopefully help and be one of those people who are willing to speak out and I guess seek truth and share opinions and perspectives, even if they're unpopular or they might get some backlash, because I sincerely am not trying to push a agenda or anything like that. I'm just trying to do my part in creating a ripple. So thanks again, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Peace. Yeah, thanks so much for being with me. I appreciate appreciate it. I feel like if we lived in the same country, we would hang out all the time at the pub just bullshitting about the same things, because anytime you share an article, I'm like, oh wait, I just shared that. Or you share something I haven't shared, I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting article, let me share that. And
is that right?
Yeah, it always seems like we're sharing the same stuff. I'm like, wow, we really are on the same page on a lot of issues.
Yeah, awesome. We're not recording yet, are we?
I am always recorded. Once the call starts, I record it, but I can cut out whatever you want.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask you something else.
Yeah.
Before we get into this stuff, what is it that you do when you don't do the Ripple Effect podcasts?
Oh, I do. I have a family-owned construction company, just a little construction company. We, a little like mom and pop stuff. We do mostly road construction. We do some private stuff, but rarely. It's if we do private stuff, it's for like, friends of the family, friends of ours, stuff like that. Most of the time,
like driveways and stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, not so much. Yeah, we do a lot of concrete work. It's a very typical like Portuguese and Italian thing that we all end up doing concrete work. But yeah, I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal. My dad when he came to the country. He was a farmer from northern Portugal, and then when my parents came to America, it was just kind of I guess probably a natural transition from being a farmer and doing hands-on stuff to get in construction. Probably that, and he had no other options because he didn't speak the language or didn't have any education. But yeah, so we have a little family business, which is good because it gives me a little bit more freedom. Sometimes I've talked to people and they're concerned about saying stuff because of where they work or what they do, and I always say, I'm like, I can't fire myself. So it's, and my parents don't listen to the show and they don't care. They don't have any real opinion on anything. So, I can't really get in too much trouble, I would say, on the show. So it kind of gives me the freedom to do that. And then, but I'm, I have two little ones. So I always joke around and say how awful of a business person I am, because I purposely attempt to focus on all the things I enjoy doing and kind of pursuing financial gain and expanding my career. To me is there's sacrifices to that. It means sacrificing time with my kids, sacrificing time with my wife, sacrificing my hobbies. So I try to do my best to balance that and kind of have a job where I have as much free time as possible, but still make enough where I can survive.
Okay, cool. I get it.
So in other words,
I was asking you because I thought that maybe you were in the some kind of a finance business, but okay.
Oh, I wish. It's funny because I think I talked about this on a show not too long ago, in regards to how as a kid coming to America and coming from like a poor family, it was money was always something that my parents were stressing about. Mostly my mother. She was always trying to cut corners, trying to save money any way you could. And when you're not making a lot of money, saving money is the same thing. Saving money and making money are your only ways of getting ahead. So her way of getting ahead was just saving money everywhere she could. So it was constantly like a stress, and it would just add up with other stresses of dealing with, me and my brother and all this stuff. So it almost, I almost sometimes feel guilty that I have this mindset where, I wish I was more passionate about, because I think about like, okay, I'm constantly having these internal battles of like, okay, if I was more focused on making money, then financially, maybe my family could be in a better place. But if I focus on making money so much that now I'm not around as much, or I'm coming home more stressed, or I'm coming home in a worse mood or tired and don't have the energy and time to spend with my family, then what does it matter if I'm making more money? So it's like this internal battle constantly going on. So and I think the stresses of having money growing up or not having money growing up kind of create this trauma where I'm just like, even now, I tell my wife, I'm like, I don't even want to look at the bills. I don't want, just tell me how much we need, and then I'll just get, because it's like I just want to focus on all the things I enjoy and focus on the things the things I have to do. I wish, I know you're in finances. I wish I had the ability to do that, because I have friends of mine that are CPAs and great with numbers, and they, you know, they use apps on their phones to keep track of all their spending and making. And I'm just like, you know, I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that, because I could, you know, it would really help out. But I just, to me, it's like it would consume so much of my brain effort, you know, my brain energy that I put into other things, and probably stress myself out, you know, constantly observing those numbers and whatnot. So it's like I just do my best to stay afloat, and as long, you know, and as long as we can do that, you know, we don't. I'm one of those people. I at least try to believe that I don't need much for happiness, as long as I have good friends, family. You know, I have things like this podcast that gives me some sense of fulfillment. Then then I'm happy. You know, I don't really need the newest car or the biggest house or any of those things. I mean, it would be nice, but you know, if I don't have it, I have plenty of things I'm grateful for.
Yeah. No, I think you're on the right track, and I think that money is kind of a dissatisfier, in a sense that if you're short, it's a stress, it's dissatisfying. But if you have a lot of it, it's not necessarily you know, like beyond a certain point. I don't think it does anything really.
Yeah, and they've done studies on that where they found that, I think, over, like, I don't know if it's like 60 or 70 grand, that your happiness doesn't increase at all. And I don't know, I'm not even sure that it has anything to do with happiness. I think what they fail to kind of put in perspective in that study is that I don't think that it's creating some type of happiness up to $60,000 or $70,000. I think it's just removing some type of stress, you know, because I think
exactly.
Yeah,
it's removing the anxiety about how you're going to pay your bill, and, you know, like whether you can afford to put food on the table and clothes and school tuition stuff for your children.
Yeah,
and I think for the rest, it's really, I don't know. I mean, you know, like I live in Monaco. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm surrounded by millionaires. And I can tell you, there's a lot of miserable ones. There's some happy ones. There's a lot of miserable ones. It's not at all clear that having a lot of money is making people happy.
Are you familiar with Dr. Christopher Ryan? He wrote the book Sex at Dawn, and also his newer book Civilized to Death.
No, I'm not aware of him.
Oh, he's awesome. I'm a huge fan of his. He's been on the show like years ago, and he has a podcast, and his new book, and he was, you know, while he's putting together the subject for the book and what the book was going to be about, he would talk about it on his podcast. And you know, when I had him on my podcast, we talked about it. It was actually prior to Civilized to Death being released. And I just loved the whole concept of it, because it was this idea that, you know, that questioning, like, what is progress, right? Like, it's like we keep thinking like if we have more stuff and things go faster and more technology and all this stuff, like we're progressing as a species. But you look at like America, one of the places that have the most, you know, material wealth. You could be poor and still have, you know, some decent material wealth, and yet we're some of the most unhappy, overprescribed, you know, on antidepressants, self-medicating with drugs and alcohol type of people in the world. So it's like, what is progress? You know, and he studies a lot of our primal ancestors, and you know, he looks at like how happy these people are who have very little things. And like one thing you see a lot of, you know, talking about studies, is that when you put people where next to other people that the income inequality isn't much, their anxiety and depression and whatnot, they're much more grateful for what they have. But when you put them next to people who have much more, then they envy that, and their anxiety and depression and all that stuff is much greater. So it's one of those things where you can see a huge correlation between, like, you know, TV, and, you know, and there's been great documentaries in the past, like there's a great Canadian documentary called The Corporation, and I think at the time when it came out, it was like the most downloaded or most sold or viewed Canadian documentary of all time. And it took years to make, but they really analyzed how corporations will use your desires and really use, you know, psychologists, scientists, all, you know, these great minds to trigger your desires and passions and make you feel like you need something to be happy, or you want something to be happy. And this all goes back to like the work of Edward Bernays, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You know, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. You know, Sigmund Freud Freud kind of want to understand how the brain worked, and Edward Bernays took his uncle's research and kind of brought that to another level by understanding how to manipulate the brain, and Noam Chomsky's work, manufacturing consent and all that stuff. I mean, a lot of people have written about this. So I think in a lot of cases you can blame the media, you can blame marketing, you can blame. I mean, Bill Hicks used to have that joke, if you work in marketing, kill yourself, which wasn't really a joke. It was more like a statement, but it's kind of one of those things where it is kind of like evil. Manipulating industry, because all you're doing is like tricking people into wanting things that they don't necessarily need. And I know a lot of times people who are capitalists say, oh, well, we're just producing the stuff that people want. And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes. And other times you're convincing us we want or need something we don't really want or need. So it's, and
they're using very, very manipulative tricks to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ricky, I just want to ask you to go back. What was the name of the author that you were mentioning before who was on your podcast? Because I'm very interested in what you just mentioned about his studies.
Yeah. It's called. His name is Dr. Christopher Ryan. I'll send you links to his website, his book, his podcast is phenomenal. He's been on the Rogan podcast some years ago. I'm trying to think where I first got exposed to his work. It probably was on the Rogan podcast, but he just really his way of thinking just really caught my attention, and just him being open-minded to so many different perspectives and opinions. And one thing I love about his podcast too is that a lot of podcasts are constantly trying to get like popular people or famous people or whatever, and his podcast, he travels a lot. He doesn't have any kids or anything like that, so he's traveled the world, constantly traveling and meeting people, and he'll just find the most fascinating people with the most incredible stories, and I love that, because it's like sometimes some mechanic. I mean, I think one podcast some years ago was I think he was Indian, like some mechanic that he was working on his Jeep. He was just talking to him and had this incredible story, and he's like, hey, you want to be on my podcast and share some of your stories? And it ended up being a super fascinating podcast. So it's amazing how many people you meet have such fascinating perspectives or opinions and stories, and I think that's really important, because a lot of times it's like, I hear conversations with people that I'm not even familiar with, and I'm like, wow, this person has a well thought out opinion and perspective, and I love the way he's thinking and the way he's connecting the dots. And he might not be as popular as this other person who has a huge show or has a huge following, but yet I think is a dumbass who, is maybe capitalizing on some tribal type of thinking of his fan base. So it's
right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to use some of this. If you don't mind, I'm going to use some of this
use anything you like. Use anything you like, Ricky. I have no,
well, because I think these conversations about money, especially now with so many people being quarantined and so many people kind of struggling with money and stuff, I think these conversations are important, because I think people can take something from the fact that we spend so much time. I say this all the time to my wife. I'm like, because sometimes she's like, oh, look at that big house, or look at that, and I'm like, babe, inside that giant house sometimes is a super unhealthy, unhappy family, and there's a price to pay sometimes for all that material stuff, and that means, like I stated before, it means spending more time at work, more hours at work, maybe doing a job that's more stressful, and sometimes I think we spend more time being envy of what we don't have, and we don't spend enough time being grateful of what we do have. Yeah,
exactly.
So,
but I think that's almost like a real effect, because I know that if you take a family in let's say ordinary circumstances, and they may be quite happy and work together, okay, and then you put them in an environment where they're surrounded with people who are significantly better off than themselves, then suddenly their perception of how well they're doing, their enjoyment of life plummets, because now suddenly there's that comparison of like, why do all these people have things that we don't, and why don't we have things that they do? And that's a thing that living in Monaco you experience in a real way. you know, and hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I
Oh,
just
sorry,
yeah.
something just popped up on the screen, so I thought that the line broke.
No, I just sent you the
And
link
I
to
know.
Christopher Ryan's website.
Okay. I've known people intimately who basically, you know, like if like one of our wealthy friends invited us over to their house, they would just be miserable because they would feel like, how come this is not my house? You know,
Yeah.
honestly, you know, to me, this is entirely alien. I genuinely don't care. You know, like I spent a year in the army, sharing the barracks with 54 stinky, snoring guys, and you know, for me, everything after that is a five-star hotel. But some people just can't take it. I don't. I can't relate, but it's real, and it creates real unhappiness. And having grown up, you know, like I grew up in a communist Yugoslavia, socialist, whatever you want to call it. It was under one-party communist rule, and we were all more or less equally well off in the sense that maybe the income disparity between the top level management in a company and the bottom level manual labor people was maybe 3 to 1. So the CEO maybe earned 3 times what the bottom level labor was making. And I can tell you without a shadow of doubt that we were much happier than what I perceive people in the West to be. Into that equality, there's something to it, where, you know, wealth doesn't necessarily define your happiness, but I think that maybe better relatedness with people, better connection does that. And I think that greater equality is more conducive to that than wealth disparity. Anyway, so that's just like an observation on the side related to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that's huge. I mean, these type of conversations are important because I think a lot of people are thinking about it. It's real issues they're dealing with every day. It's just, you know, I think it's really easy to get stuck in that rhythm and that kind of propaganda of, hey, you know, I got to get promoted. Hey, I got to get ahead. Hey, I got to make more money. Hey, you know, and then you get in that cycle of like, okay, so you make more money and then you know, you end up spending it and then you have to make more and then you spend it and you make more and you spend it. And it's just like this vicious cycle. Yeah. And it's just a very temporary satisfaction. That's why I love talking to retired guys. I love talking to like people who are like closer to the finish line than they are the starting line of their lives, because I think you get to a certain age, you can't help but put things in perspective and look at things from a different light. And you start, you know, not taking the little things for granted, you know, spending time with, I remember one time I was talking to some people, I don't know if it was at the gym or maybe I was at a restaurant with my wife, and we ended up talking this. I think it was. We were at a restaurant with my wife, and we're talking with an older couple at the bar or something like that, and you know, we're small talk, and then we're taking up a little bit of their time. Like, sorry for taking up your time, you know, and they're like, oh, don't worry, we're retired. Nobody cares about us now, anyways. And it was just you know, just kind of making the joke that like when you're old, like nobody cares about you anymore because you're not working for a company who can milk you for your labor. Maybe your kids or whoever are going ahead with their lives and they're not focused on you anymore. Right. And it's just like, you know, I think when that happens, you realize like, holy shit, like, you know, when you have time to finally enjoy life, you're like, you know what, although, you know, I enjoy just company. I enjoy just having people around who care about me. And and I see with my parents. I remember one time my dad, and I think I've told this story on the show before, but my dad was kept calling me. He's like, "Hey, Dad," he's like, "Rick, the TV won't work. Can you come over and try to fix it?" And I'm like, okay. Anytime they have any type of technical issues, they call me because they're not very good with that type of stuff. So I go over and I'm like, "Dad, you called me like 100 times today. It's just a TV." I'm like, you were raised in a house that didn't have running water. I'm like, well, it's just a TV. And he looked at me and you could see like his brain was working, and he's like, "Yeah, you're kind of right, man." It's like it's and it's just one of those things where even he gets caught up into these material things, where something as simple as playing cards or having some company around, you end up taking for granted. And another short story, like I remember growing up and my room was right above my dad's wine cellar, and he still makes wine every year, and he makes like about 180 gallons of wine every year, and he usually he uses it all up because he drinks wine every day, and he gives tons of it away for like Christmas gifts or just people want a bottle of it. He'll give away a bottle of it. And they would spend all night, him and his buddies would, after they make wine, it was typical for them to go to everybody's house. A couple guys would get together, like, "Hey, let's go try Agostino's wine. Let's go try, Zay's wine. Let's go try, and they'll go to people's houses, and they would hang out in the wine cellar, have some chorizo, which is Portuguese sausage, or some type of a dried meat and smoked meat, and sit there and have some wine. They would talk all night. And I'd be upstairs, and I'm like, dude, when are these guys going to go home? I'm like, this, all they're doing is sitting around in a wine cellar. And like, now that I'm older, I look at that and I'm like, how awesome is that? Just having a couple friends together, enjoying conversation, enjoying your senses, the taste, the smells. I'm like, I didn't get it, and now I get it, and I'm so happy that like at somewhat still very young age, I'm turning 35 this year in April, and will most likely be quarantined during my birthday, but it's it's one of those things where like I appreciate those type of things, like just having a couple of friends together, having some good conversation. That's why I was joking in the beginning of this podcast that me and you would spend a lot of time having a drink and just bullshitting about stuff, about what's going on in the world or whatnot. Because
but look.
Yeah, did I lose you? Yeah.
There's nothing more enjoyable than sharing good company and having a good conversation about something meaningful. I mean, this is how I grew up. Honestly, I for I don't know, from the time we were 12 years old, I had my group of friends. I would just go out and sit somewhere and just talk forever. Like shoot some basketball, play some football, and then grab some beers and talk. And so there's like that's enormously enjoyable, but there's something really important to that. Like there's I think there's like a real need to bond with people, to make part of a community. And that's like in the modern life, that's kind of with the rhythm of how we work, what we have to do to make a living, that's all being cut up and shredded somehow. And then as a result, people are less happier. There's like a really interesting study that I read about in, I don't know if you heard of Ian McGilchrist. He's a British psychologist or psychiatrist, I forget. And he wrote this beautiful book called The Master and the Emissary. The Master and His Emissary is the title of the book. And in it, he cites a study, like a major study about Mexican immigrants coming to the United States. And what the study shows that these Mexican immigrants basically, like they study their happiness, and they're happy when they come to the United States. And then it turns out that the longer they live in the United States, the less happy they are, right? Because when they come, they keep a certain culture and a certain community. And then the second generation, that's all shredded up a little bit, and their level of happiness is considerably lower. And by the third generation, they're completely, how do you call it? They're living in accordance with the existing system in the United States. And then their level of happiness is the same as the general population, which is to say quite low. And I thought that was extremely interesting as an empirical study about how these certain neoliberal economic systems are somehow adverse to human happiness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens a lot. I have a friend of mine who's Polish, and he's a police officer, and he's his wife is like right off the boat Polish, and when he met her, he's like, dude, she could care less about material things. And he jokes around about how, like, he's like, once she made American friends, he's like, that all went out the window. He's like, I had this great Polish girl, he's like, who could care less about how much money I made or whatever. And he's like, now he's like, our house isn't big enough, we need this, we need that, she wants to upgrade her vehicle every year. It's like you know, and I'm like, yeah, man, I mean,
interesting.
Yeah,
how interesting. But you know, like I'll share with you one observation I made, and which is very, very weird, because it spans almost 20 years, right? No, it spans 20 years. So here's what happened, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you the story. My then wife and I went to Cincinnati to a friend's wedding, right? And after the wedding, we still had a day or two in Cincinnati. And one day we just came out. We were staying at a hotel in downtown Cincinnati, and I just thought, like, okay, let's go find a sports bar, something really simple, have like a hamburger and a beer, and then go to bed. But there's nothing in Cincinnati, right? And so we walked out, and my impulse was I asked the bellboy in front of the hotel to tell me where we could find like a sports bar where we could just have a burger and the fries and a couple of beers. And he sent us to this restaurant, which turned out to be a hugely overpriced steakhouse, where we ate. We spent like, I don't know, $80 or $90 a head. I'm talking 20 years ago, right? And I really made clear to the guy, no, we just want to eat something simple, something like, cheap. And he said, like, yeah, you can eat something simple there too, but you really couldn't. And I thought that was so strange. Why did he send us here? I told him, but my wife, she was American, and she said, no, he's getting commissions from this place. He sends them people, they pay him commissions. And to me, this was like, what do you mean? There's no way. And then I thought, like, oh yeah, you're right. He even called up the restaurant to make a reservation for us, which I thought was so nice of him, right? And she's like, no, don't be naive. He's getting commissions for this. He's sending two people. He's telling them two people are arriving. I'm sending them to them, and I get a cut of that. Okay, so to me, this was like completely alien. I just don't understand. Somebody asks you a favor, you tell them, you go over there, right? To get that thing. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Because now I'm observing the same thing here where I live. So I don't know. As in the course of my business, I sometimes form a company, open a bank account. I need some help with accounting. I need some help with administration. It used to be that I would ask a friend, somebody I know that knows something about this. I would call them up. I would say, like, hey, like, where could I open a bank account for an offshore company? And they'd say, like, oh yeah, sure, I have a friend working at such and such bank. Give him a call and see if they might help you. And so, like, about 20 years ago, this was how I got my stuff done. Like, I would just call a friend and ask, like, hey, I need somebody who can do accounting for me that doesn't cost too much. And they say, like, oh yeah, call this guy, he's really good, he'll do it for you. And that was that. Okay. Today, in some cases, the exact same people, I would call them and they'll say, hey, so-and-so, can you tell me who might be able to open me a bank account for an offshore company? And then the next question is like, how much? The question is how much? How much money are you going to put in the bank account? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then they won't tell me, right? They don't want to tell me. So they have they know where I could open this bank account, but they don't want to tell me until I tell them how much money is going to go into that bank account, because then they claim commission from from the bank. And then I found out that the banks pay 30 or 35% of the fees that they earn on the money that gets deposited in their bank, which, adds up to something, And same thing for other kinds of favors. So like the same people that 20 years ago would just tell me, oh yeah, call this guy and go, they'll open your bank account, or they'll do your accounting for you or whatever, are now asking me always like, well, how much business are you going to do there? And then getting the information of how and where you can solve certain problems becomes difficult. And it seems that everybody is asking commissions for everything, like I'll have people calling me, oh yeah, please go to this acupuncturist, please call and make an appointment. And I'm like, why? Why do you want me to make that appointment? Because everybody is like pitching something to charge commissions on something. And it's like, and this literally happened over the last several years, that people are really displaying a certain greed for these commissions. And I thought, like, what is going on? Why is this going on? Why can't people just give you a simple answer? Like I still, if somebody asks me, where can I open a bank account? Where can I get a good dentist or this? I just tell them, go there. And then it struck me that the reason why everybody is acting this way is that the people are starting to feel very insecure, okay? Because 20 years ago, if you had a job in a company, you kind of figured you're going to have that job in that company next year and 5 years from now. And this has all changed. So now if I have a job in a company, very many people aren't sure that they're going to have that job next year or 5 years from there. And so they feel a lot of pressure to try to grab as much money from the position that they have as they can in the shortest term possible, because they don't know what's going to happen next year. And then it struck me that this like neoliberal system where you can get sacked on a 2-week notice or on a week's notice, where companies, like they're in business, but maybe next year they're going to be out of business because everything's become hyper competitive, and everything is down to squeezing out the last drop of profits from every operation. People are feeling increasingly insecure, and this is why they're being very anxious to take money where they can, as fast as they can. And then this anxiety about money ends up contaminating human relationships in ways that didn't used to be there. And so this is something, because, okay, so we started talking about the United States as in that's where that's coming from. That's just the economic model. It's not anything particular about the United States that makes that so, but it's the economic model where everything is down to dollars and cents, to squeezing maximum amount of profit, to destroying all barriers to competition and shredding worker protections and job security and everything else in order to maximize production, in order to maximize profits and output and so forth. And in the end, it ends up really affecting people's psychology, people's relationships with one another, and everything is being reduced to the dollar amounts. And so that economic model has now pretty much infected all of Europe. And the kind of behavior that used to be alien to me just 20 years ago is now pretty much the rule. And that's the end of that speech. I just thought I'd share it with you because I think it's very interesting, because I've observed it as a novice who came from another system, and I think for somebody who lives in this system every day of their lives, it's almost unnoticeable. It's like a normal, but when you come into it from an outside, from a different system, it's completely alien, and it's actually kind of unfortunate, because at the end of the day, we all really largely depend on getting help from others in our community to do stuff that we don't know how to do, which is most things that you have to do in life.
Yeah, and I mean that was the essence of our survival, was the fact that the reason why we're social and tribal creatures is a lot of it was because, you know, and there was this MMA fighter, Justin Wren, who went to he has an amazing story. He started a nonprofit organization trying to get water to clean water to people in Africa, because, you know, some ridiculous amount of people were dying just from not having clean water, and it really struck a chord with him. So that became like a life mission. And but he said this quote, which I can't remember if it was his or he was repeating it from somewhere else. He read it, but he said, if you want to go far, you go alone. Or no, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And it is one of those things where, like, we need community, we need each other, because, you know, we can't do everything on our own. Eventually, you are going to need help. You are going to need somebody in your life. And I think when you get older, you know, you put a lot of that in perspective, because when you get hurt, or you have surgery, or you have some illness, having a loved one or family members or friends to take care of you, or just be there with you and be some kind of moral support, then that's super helpful. And you know, it's a, you know, I heard a story once, I don't know how true it is, about some rich guy who passed away, and the only person who showed up to his funeral was his driver. And it's just like, there's probably some truth to that, you know, and the stories like that. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it does become a issue where that type of thinking, you know, capitalism and socialism and all these isms were, you know, and I've had everybody from, you know, libertarians on. I've had tons of libertarians on, anarcho-libertarians. I've had Professor Richard Wolff, who was on not too long ago, who's you know, studies Marxism and Karl Marx and stuff. Yeah. And I love examining all these different isms and really get into the roots of what they mean and how they work and all that stuff, because I think a lot of times people use the words and they don't really know the history of it. They've been told by the media or by whoever, you know, somebody on the radio or a podcast or a radio host, that this ism's bad, it's evil, and it's this, you know, it's this bad thing. But they're not. They're just philosophies. They're ways of running a economy or running a society, and that's all they are. And then corrupt people will obviously take advantage of any ism. And I think it has gone to a point where, like, making money used to be a thing for survival, and now it's just become a way of life. And there's a great Harvard professor, which you know, I talked about a long time ago on the podcast. He was a huge influence of mine when I was younger. I ran into some of his courses online, and then ended up buying his book. It was called, I actually just looked it up to make sure I get the title right, Well, Money Can't Buy the Moral Limits of Market. And it's by Professor Michael Sandel, and it really is a really interesting book about, like, you know, just basically the moral limits of market. You know, how it's not, you know, you can't just look at the market or look at making money or capitalism or whatnot and just say, like, and put morals aside. There are, you know, you should take in consideration, you know, as humans, like, okay, is this just, is this fair, is this something I should be doing, am I helping people, or am I only helping myself? And, you know, as people know, if they learn psychology and they look at many studies that prove this, like, we're much happier when we're nice to other people, you know, when we're getting along with other people, and when we're not, and I think the burden of, you know, burning bridges and just care, and I say this all the time, the addiction to money and power, those symptoms are the exact same symptoms that somebody who has addiction to alcohol or anything else, you know, or drugs or pills or whatever it may be. Like, it's, you can never get enough of it. You need more of it. You're willing to be a scumbag, for lack of a better term. You're willing to you know, to screw your friends, screw your family, screw anybody to get ahead. And, you know, and it's just like, it's like the typical thing. I hear it all the time. It's like, oh, it's not personal, it's business. And it's like, well, you know what? You can't just use that to justify a unmoral thing you do. You can't just say, well, don't take it personally. It's just business. No, it's like what you're really saying is that, I'm going to screw you, but don't take it personally because I only care about myself and I don't have a moral compass. It's just like that's what you're really saying. And so
yeah, and and unfortunately, like the culture of our society today actually kind of approves this kind of approach, because it actually they actually explicitly teach you that if you're being selfish and working to maximize your own personal advantage, that somehow magically makes everybody else better off. So like being like cold and selfish like that is actually kind of approved and encouraged through our educational curriculum. It's not really well explained other than through neoliberal economics, but it's absolutely false, except that if you kind of espouse those views, then you feel justified and you say like, hey, like, buddy, nothing personal, but this maximizes my advantage. Too bad for you, but I know that I'm doing right by our great society, and so everybody's better off, even if you just happen to be screwed at this moment.
Well, and they've done studies on how CEOs and people who are very financially successful, how they have, psychologists or psychiatrists would diagnose them as psychopaths. Their way of thinking. I mean, it's so, and I almost feel like you almost have to be to do some of those things, to be able, like, I mean, that's why I say I run a good of a business as I can as a moral person, but I'm not a good business person because I too often think about, we only have a handful of employees, but I too often think about what's best for them because I know these guys personally. I know their families. I know who they are. I hang out with them sometimes. I talk to them all the time. So it's like, I can't do something that purposely screws them, even if it benefits myself. I can't, to me, it's like I truly feel bad, and I have to be able to look in the mirror and be happy with who I am. And, I can't do some, I've had things done to our business by larger companies that I'm like, I could never, if I was in their position, how the hell can they do something so morally wrong or screw us the way they're screwing us, knowing we're a small business and they're a multi-million-dollar business. They know that they're screwing us for their benefit. And it's like, it's, I'm just like, if I was in their position, I couldn't do that, and that's probably why I'll never work for a big company, and probably why my company or our company, our family company, will never, will never grow to the extent that it could, because I'm not that, I can't put my moral, reevaluate my moral compass and be satisfied with some of these decisions, even if it financially gets me ahead. And I think that's a huge issue. And it's funny because your story about that you were sharing, I have very similar stories with, like, sometimes people recommend us to other people. They'll be like, hey, I have a buddy who's going to call you. I told him that you guys do driveways or you do sidewalks or patios or pavers, whatever it may be, and he's going to call you for a quote or whatever. And this was years ago, and so luckily this doesn't happen that often. But we had a friend of my parents who we knew, and I think he was Indian and his wife was Portuguese, and that's how they knew him. And their friend, and I guess I probably shouldn't have said he's Indian because it's going to make him sound like the stereotypical idea of Indian people being cheap. But it kind of goes along with that theme. I guess there's some stereotypes. There's a little bit of truth too. But he recommended some work to us, or recommended us to some a friend of his. Then we end up doing the work, and he comes to my parents and asks for commission. And he's like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, I got you that work, so you owe me some money. It's like, wait, I thought we were friends here. And so it's just like, right. It's same thing. I was like, what? Wait, I recommend things all the time to people. I help people out all the time. I help other, and exactly. I do it with the podcast. I have, listeners all the time contact me. hey, I have this question or whatever it may be. And I'm like, listen, if I have the time, I will help you with anything I can. And you have any question, hit me up. Eventually, even if I don't get back to you right away, I'll get back to you and I'll help you out. And I've helped other podcasters with getting guests on by giving them contact information and whatnot. And I don't care. Like, I don't look for anything in return. I'm actually just happy helping people because, we're all getting help in some way. We like to think that we're doing everything on our own, but we're not. I mean, the reason why this podcast exists is because people like yourself, Alex, are willing to come on and deal with my long rants at times and my getting off topic at times. But you're willing to come on and have these conversations without my guests, people who are kind enough to come on and take time out of their busy schedules and day to try to have some interesting conversations that can help people listening. Then this show wouldn't exist because people wouldn't want to just listen to me talk. Right. So it's like even though I do some of the work in editing and upload all that stuff, but there would be nothing to edit, there'd be nothing to upload, there'd be nothing if I didn't have people who are willing to come on. And and so every guest that I have on, I understand, like, without them there would be no show. So we all get help, even if it's indirectly. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because I know you brought up growing up in a socialist / communist country economy, counting on, I guess, how you want to. I guess it's all perspective, right? Because I mean, communism, socialism. Some people call every socialist country a communist country. But what's your opinion?
Well, I think socialism would be more accurate.
Yeah, I think so too. But what's your opinion? Because you're growing up in a country like that, I've seen opposite reactions where people hate socialism because they grew up in a socialist country, and some people have a more positive perspective on socialism because they grew up in a socialist country. What's your opinion on it?
Okay, so I'll explain to you exactly where the problem lies, and most people do not understand the difference. Okay, so basically, socialism and what you call capitalism is the same thing. In one kind of society, okay, so let's go back. The thing that contains the seed of destruction for both systems is the monetary unit, the money, okay? And I have to diverge a little bit into a discussion of money because it then it's relevant to both isms, okay? Basically, so the money that we have in circulation that we use as means of exchange and unit of account is created out of thin air, out of nothing. It's put into circulation as debt, and it has to be repaid with interest. So what happens is that your banking system, let's say, or your government, they put in $1 billion into circulation as somebody's debt, right? Somebody takes on the debt, and then that debt becomes the unit of exchange. It has to be paid back with interest, which means that in 20 or 30 years' time, for every dollar you borrowed, you have to pay back $2. But only $1 went into circulation. So there is no other dollar to repay the debt with, right? And so what has to happen is that more people take on additional debt with which the prior debts plus interest is going to be paid. So as long as more people and more companies and the government take on new debt, and more money goes into circulation, then the old debts plus interest can be paid. But the whole system is a bit of a Ponzi scheme because it depends on ever more debt going into the system. Okay, now a problem occurs because people normally save a portion of their income. So if you're in $100, going to pay your bills, you're going to have something left, and you're going to want to hang on to $1 or $2 or $5 for the rainy days. That's normal. That's what people do. Let's call it, in a closed economic system, what people earn are expenses of companies that pay the people. So basically, everything that's income on one side is expenses plus profits on the other side of the equation. But if people hang on to part of that income, right, then the purchasing power in the system is reduced. So let's say if the people, if the totality of businesses in an economic system generate a domestic product, let's say, of 100, and that 100 is income of the people who produce that stuff, and the income with which the product is meant to be consumed. But if people hang on to 5% of their income and only spend 95% of it, then all the products created in the system will not be able to be sold for 100. They'll have to reduce the price to sell it, right? So what you start to get is deflation, because to sell all the products and services that are being created in the system, you need to reduce prices. And if you reduce the prices, then your profits go south, and then many companies will not, and many people will not be able to pay back their debts. And at that point, companies have to reduce output. And as they reduce output, they have to let people go. And as they let people go, there's even less purchasing power in the system. So there's like, what happens is a deflationary debt spiral, right? Because the whole system shrinks. And the system left to itself in what you would call genuinely free market economy, the system would stabilize at depression level of production, meaning that the society would kind of produce what the society needs for sustenance. So people have food, so people have shelter and clothing, and the basic services are covered, like healthcare, car repairs, haircuts, whatever, like that kind of stuff that people always demand and will pay for. That would survive. But a lot of the fluff that's generated in the economy on top of these essentials would die off. And then the system would stabilize. Okay, because of going back to the monetary unit, because the money always has to be paid back with interest, it is absolutely essential for modern economic systems to always grow, right? Because you need to pay the debt plus interest. So growth means that more people take on debt, create greater demand, pay more bills, more stuff is created, more stuff is consumed, more people go deeper into debt, more stuff is so every year we have to grow 2%, 3%, 5%. The GDP has to always go up. If it doesn't go up, you get a deflationary collapse. Okay, so because people save money, and because saving money reduces purchasing power, and because reduced purchasing power leads into deflationary debt spiral, and because at that point the free market economy would stabilize at depression level of activity, to ensure that the economic system is always growing, usually, inevitably, it is the government that has to step in and generate the purchasing power so that the excess production is always being absorbed. The government doesn't produce anything, so they're creating debt out of nothing, right? And then the government, as the time goes by, the government role in the economy gets bigger and bigger and bigger, whether you're talking about socialism or whether you're talking about capitalism. So the difference between socialist and capitalist systems, so this is all the same on both sides. In socialist system and in the capitalist system, this is all the same. So inevitably the government has to step in. It has to bridge the deflationary gap. it has to create the additional purchasing power to keep the system always growing, and it has to keep adding debt. And this is not even controversial. If you look at the U.S. government debt, you see it. It just grows every year, and every time you get you vote for a new government, for a new president, for a new Congress that says we're going to balance the budget, it's impossible. Either they don't understand what they're talking about, or they're lying to you. They're never going to balance the budget. They're always going to be increasing their spending because they have to, because otherwise the system implodes. Okay, so the difference between capitalist economy as we label it today and the socialist economy as we label it today, which is wrong and arbitrary, but the difference is basically that in what we call socialist economies, the excess purchasing power that the government mediates gets kind of dispersed in the population. So it benefits families and ordinary people. You know, people get more generous pensions, more money is invested in healthcare, libraries, schools, and so forth. People get, let's call it, better salaries in state companies and so forth. In what we label as capitalist economy, the excess is distributed. The government-mediated excess is being distributed through the banking and corporate sector. So governments subsidize big oil, big agriculture, big banks, and the military-industrial complex. So that's the difference. So you have socialism just as we used to have socialism, except that in your kind of socialism, the beneficiaries are the banks, the corporations, the military-industrial complex, the big agriculture. And in our socialism, the ordinary people were the beneficiaries of government largesse. So that was long and complicated, but that's basically the difference. So when people say, oh, I hate socialism, they're really mistaken, because they already have socialism. It's just that it's not them who are benefiting from this excess government spending. It's the corporations and banks.
Now, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to have to re-listen to that to take it all in, because I'm such a dumbass that I sometimes it's hard for me to keep up. But
no, this is a complicated thing, because, and most people don't understand it, and it's not because it's not possible to understand it. It's because our educational system deliberately muddles the waters and deliberately misleads and deceives on this point, because it is essential that the people don't understand it. And I went through the American university system. I took the whole thing so seriously, I graduated magna cum laude in my class. And I was very bothered that I didn't understand how the economic system worked, and I didn't understand what money was. And I really, really tried. And I didn't understand it until the internet and YouTube. And then I started watching these documentaries by Bill Still and Richard Werner and so on. And finally you realize, my God, the thing is insultingly simple, except they made it needlessly complicated, because they're really concealing very important principles of how the system works, and they're misleading everybody altogether, so that we accept and acquiesce to something that's fraudulent, wrong, criminal, and to the disadvantage of the many for the advantage of the few. That's really what it is, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It's really a demonstrable fact.
Well, I remember watching Zeitgeist Addendum, and I know James Corbett did a great documentary called Century of Enslavement, the History of the Fed, and he really goes into history of money and banking and all that stuff. And when you look at some of these documentaries and you see somebody break it down and dumb it down for somebody like myself, it's like you said, it's almost like so simple to understand that the issues with debt, the fact that banks are making money out of nowhere and putting money into the system and things like that, and it's really not hard to consume. But a lot of times, you're right. It almost seems like it's purposely made complicated for the purpose of you feeling like you can't understand, and then you're just like, well, I'll leave it in the hands of people who do understand what's going on, and so yeah. And I think the first part of what you were saying, like some of the issues, not with socialism, but some of the issues with capitalism, how you almost need extreme amount of spending and debt creating to keep it afloat. I mean, weren't those some of the same arguments that Karl Marx had with capitalism?
Yeah, probably, but it was a long time ago when I was studying in former Yugoslavia in school. They taught us Marxism. We never took the whole subject seriously. I think that, honestly, I would erase Karl Marx from the study of economics. I think it's, it doesn't lead to good answers. I don't think Marxism leads to good answers. I think that today we have very good understanding of how the system works, what the system is to begin with. That we don't need to go into Marxism. We don't need to bolster the dichotomies between left and right, which are false and contrived. We don't have to fight the fights between monetarists and Keynesians. All of that is just, intellectual divide and rule. I think that what is essential is that first, before you even decide anything about anything, people have to determine what it is that we want. What kind of world do we want to inhabit? It's easier if you think in terms of what kind of world you want your children to inhabit. What do you want to leave behind for them? And then we create a society around that vision. It's really as simple as that. Now, do we want to work hard? Do we want to maximize profits and output? Do we want to produce maximum amount of useless crap? Or do we want prosperity, safe, clean neighborhoods, plenty of time for leisure and time with family and friends, eating good quality food, drinking good quality drinks, and so forth, and having good education system, beautiful, safe parks and everything? We as a society create an insane amount of prosperity and wealth. It's just that it's not accessible to most of us because there's this money mediation. And so all the abundance that you see around us, which is insane when you think about it, is the product of human labor and human ingenuity, but it's off limits to most of us because you can't have it unless you have money to pay for it with. And so if we create a vision of what it is that we want to achieve as humanity, how we want our children to live, the world we want to leave behind for them, then we can create a society around that vision. And I don't think that vision includes working hard. I mean, I don't mean to say that as in no, we want to be lazy and inert. I just mean that we don't have to create bullshit occupations of keeping busy for the sake of keeping busy, which is what we have now. If you read David Graeber's bullshit jobs, you realize the things have gotten ridiculous.
Is that the name of the
book?
So
we can easily create prosperity for everyone to have, so where the world could literally be paradise now on this earth. But the process of re-engineering society around a different vision than what is imposed on us that's going to be the hard struggle, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to prevail in this struggle at this stage, because most people still not only don't understand it and don't see it, they don't want to understand or see it. You know, they're kind of like grown comfortable living in the chicken coop, and they're terrified of the idea of roaming free, to use the metaphor. And so I think what we're doing now is probably a good way to start slowly diffusing the, if not authoritative knowledge, then at least food for thought. Because the reality we have today doesn't have to be what it is. I think a very, very interesting precedent to study was what the Arab rulers in Spain had for 800 years. The period is called La Convivencia. Maybe you'll know something about that since your Portuguese origins. And for 800 years, they had an economic and political and social system that was far and away the most prosperous chunk of Europe, which was most of today's Spain. They had fountains and water systems and parks and education and healthcare, and they had libraries with, I think they had like 1 million volumes in their libraries, whereas the whole rest of Europe combined had some ridiculous number. This is before the printing press was invented, right? And so there are different economic models, and we're not all cemented in Keynesian versus monetarists. You know, it's not like there's only vanilla and chocolate to choose from. But I think that everything we want to build has to start from what we want to create. Economic growth for the sake of economic growth is absolutely ridiculous, because, you know, like anything that you think you're going to grow 3% a year forever, you realize it becomes, you know, like 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, that 3% becomes bigger than your entire GDP today. So the imperative of always having economic growth is patently ridiculous, but they never tell you this in school. And if something is unsustainable, it means it's going to collapse. And I think, unfortunately, now we've lived into this as a reality. But I think it would be good to take advantage of the moment to think up a different thing, to envision a different reality, to start thinking like, okay, what kind of a world would I want my kids to live in? And I think that it would be good for us to start thinking about that, because I think that we're at a crossroads, and we definitely don't want to move into some kind of Orwellian world where, you know, like a small handful of elite players define how everybody else is going to live, but instead that we fulfill human potential as creation of nature that has inherent inalienable right to be here. And so, yeah, I think that leads us to extremely interesting questions, and I think that we should definitely clear our minds, envision this world that we want, and then have a spine and take steps to move us in that direction.
I could not agree more with everything you just said. One thing I love about anarcho-libertarians, people who are part of the Zeitgeist movement, anybody who looks at things outside the box, you know, the Venus Project, is just, I just like the idea of questioning if the way we've created our society has to be the only way a society works, you know, and questioning if there's alternatives or better ways of having a world, a country, a society. To me, those questions are so important, because it is one of those things where just like if we create a society where it's just all about money and really the winners are the, you know, and I think Dr. Christopher Ryan says this, where he's like, if you look at the winners, so we've created a society where the winners are the people who consume the most money and are CEOs of businesses and all that stuff, but yet they're some of the most unhappy people in the world. Then even if the winners are unhappy and miserable fucks,
right,
then your game is fucked. You know, so it's like if they're not happy, then we're all playing a game that is flawed to begin with. And I think that's it's so true. And you know, this, I guess this goes into a lot of people are talking about how now it is a crossroads, and some people are talking about obviously all this quarantining is, I mean, one, it's going to cause a lot of things. It's going to cause some businesses to figure out that that they can lay people off, and because they found more efficient ways of doing things. It's going to create obviously economies to fall apart even quicker than they probably were. But like you said, like this idea, like so many different ideas that people don't think about, when you bring it up, Alex, and you put it in perspective and you highlight them, it makes perfect sense. And this idea that like you can have quarterly gains every quarter forever is completely ridiculous. Like this idea, like that's just the way things are. It's like we should just, you know, companies are going to just constantly make, and the reason so much corruption and so much, you know, chemicals are put in products that are unsafe because they're cheaper than, you know, some previous thing they're using, or you know, the reason why corporations lie or cut corners or whatever it may be, a lot of it is influenced and provoked by the fact that they're constantly trying to have these quarterly gains, and they're constantly trying to find ways to continuously make more money. So this idea of constantly growing causes a lot of bad things in the world, and it causes people to do a lot of bad things, and corporations to make a lot of bad decisions for humanity for those quarterly gains. So it's just like it's, and like you said, like if you just continue doing it, you can't continue doing it forever. And if we understand that you can't continue doing it forever, then
maybe sooner or later it crashes, right?
Exactly.
Inevitably.
Yeah, of course.
So why not stop straight away?
Yeah.
Why not rethink the system? We have to we absolutely have to rethink the system, because, you know, if we allow the likes of Bill Gates and Lloyd Blankfein and all these people to rethink the system for us, well, you know what they're going to do? They're just going to try to vacate the real estate, because, you know, like what happens once you've polarized wealth to this extent? You know, you have 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half. So what happens? These 3 people, they live in lavish mansions, and they have to rely on people servicing them, right? You know, Jeff Bezos cannot go to 7-Eleven to get himself a Coke or a pack of cigarettes, whatever. He has to send somebody. But they have to rely on other people. Well, if these other people are desperate, then Jeff Bezos himself is going to feel very insecure surrounded by these people. So he's going to have more security around himself to protect him from these people potentially, you know, kidnapping his child and demanding ransom, right? Well, then when he has all these security people around himself, these security people might kidnap his child and demand ransom, right? So your wealth is becoming a trap, and your future is going to be increasingly paranoid the more wealth you extract and the more desperate you make the people below, right? Inevitably. And so then your next impulse is like, hey, guess what? The planet is overpopulated. Let's just get rid of everybody. You know what I mean? And they do talk about this. I mean, they had those, what are those that monument they had somewhere down in Georgia, like...
You talking about event 201, or
no? I'm talking about there used to be. I think
the Georgia the Georgia Guidestones. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly that thing where they say like they want to reset the world population back down to 500 million. Well, how are you going to do that? You know, there's like 7-8 billion now. That means that you actually intend to snuff out 7.5, 6.5, 7.5 billion people. Well, that's not nice, is it? But essentially, I think that they've come to the level of paranoia that they can't continue to coexist with this. Practically, they created a subspecies of humanity. And so then now they want to get rid of us, right? And I'll be damned if this whole coronavirus thing isn't part of that agenda, because they're already like rolling out, they're falling over themselves to create a vaccine, right? And then they're, you listen to what the governments in the UK and I don't know, the United States are saying. They're like, they'll create immunity certificates, right? And they're planning these digital implants where you'll have your health records on a microchip, right? And if that goes to its logical next step, that means that then that microchip might be connected to your bank account, where you'll have your digital cash. And if you're properly immunized, then you'll be approved you'll have access to your digital cash for approved purchases. I mean, it's like properly scary stuff. And yesterday I watched some panel, and it's one of these pastor guys. I don't know his name because he strikes me as a little bit all over the place. So I don't make a habit of listening to him. But apparently he was in Davos as a delegate of the White House some recent year, like Trump administration, right? And so he had White House passes. So what White House? He's the ambassador of President Donald Trump, right? The number one leader in the world. And so he wanted to go to some discussion panel where they were discussing, and apparently Bill Gates was part of this panel, where they were discussing these exact agendas about the digital implants and money, like where you have your digital cash in your implanted chip and so forth. And they wouldn't let him into the panel. They wouldn't let him into the audience where this discussion was being held. And he was like, but I'm here, I'm part of the White House delegation. And they were like, no, you're not allowed. You can't go in there. So this was closed door to a delegation of the United States president of the White House. I just could not believe it. I was like, excuse me, what's going on? But anyway, what it tells you is that these certain very high level elite players with practically unlimited means are fantasizing and probably plotting to unroll some kind of demonic agenda to get rid of most of the people. I mean, I hope that I'm wrong, but on balance of evidence, and even by their own statements, statements by Bill Gates, by Ted Turner, by various other of these people, they clearly are keen to reduce world population, which is a polite way of saying getting rid of a good chunk of humanity. And what do you say about that? They're not in a nut house. They're not in prison. They're not only free. They're actually shaping the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it still boggles my mind that people who are ignoring the amounts of evidence in that there's something more going on here. To me, it's people are willing to give up everything that they love, all their enjoyment in life. I mean, we started off this podcast talking about us community and us being social creatures and the importance of that. I mean, a lot of people believe, and I've had Johan Hari, who wrote the book Lost Connections, on the podcast, how important community is, and just having friends and family in regards to like addiction and drug addiction, how like a lot of depression and all that stuff has to do more with just a lack of happiness that you have in life and community than it has to do with how addictive to substances. But we talk about all this stuff, and then everybody's willing to give up community and all the things they enjoy, the things that bring them happiness in life, just for something that nobody's even questioning. And I always say, I'm like, accept nothing and question everything. And when somebody has lied to you over and over again, when the government has lied to you over and over again, I have so many people online who agree with me and are happy that I'm posting things and whatnot. But a lot of people won't publicly say those things themselves or share those things themselves because they're getting attacked over and over again, because people truly believe that staying at home is a sacrifice we are making for the greater good. And, and they're ignoring all the other evidence that there's people who are either behind this, or at least I think it's easy to believe that there's people absolutely taking advantage of this. So, and that's
at the very least.
Exactly. At the very least, people are absolutely, and that's super obvious. So and yet everybody's just like, and they've done a great job of making people feel like stay at home. It's I see people posting like, oh, stop taking so long at grocery stores and stop being on your phone and touching everything and hurry. It's like people are turning on each other, and you hear some talks about people who are of Asian descent, who look Asian and might not even be Chinese, being looked at differently or being harassed. There's so many. I just had Whitney Webb on the podcast, who worked for Mint Press News, and she has a great new article on the Last American Vagabond website, and about Dark Winter and some other operations. But we really were talking about these correlations and these similarities between like 9/11, the anthrax attacks, and all the stuff, and what's going on right now. And you see it where like the same way people were tricked into believing that if you were anti-Iraq war, you were anti-soldiers and veterans. Which was so ridiculous that I couldn't even comprehend how people made that correlation, how people linked it to. Because to me, the most pro-military veteran position you can have on war is being anti-war, and now it's just kind of the same thing where just like if you're questioning things because of the fact that you don't want people to be taken advantage of, because you do have a moral compass, and you do feel bad for people, and you do feel bad for my kid every night is sad because we can't watch soccer together. He doesn't understand, and it's not about, sports, obviously it's meaningless. It's not really that important compared to much bigger things. But it was a moment that we could share together where we could, we put on our jerseys, we sit together, we root for a team, and it was an experience we could have together and just, and enjoy the moment together, cheering together and whatnot. And he's not understanding why this is all happening, why when we go to the grocery store, he has to stay in the car with me, and him and my daughter can't go in the grocery store. Like, I'm trying to explain this to him and whatnot. And it's hard to explain to him because there is literally no logic to it. There is, my wife's, I told my wife, I'm like, just bring one of the kids in to the store with you. I'm like, let them just walk around a little bit and feel normal for a second. She's like, yeah, but the way people are going to look at me, and I'm just like, you're so right. Even though the majority of people who are dying are old and have multiple symptoms, and yet people would still look at you like you're freaking crazy for bringing your kid anywhere. I've been bringing my kids to the park as much as I can. I mean, the weather's been sucking, but as much as I can, I've been letting them just try to give them some sense of normal life and as much as I can. And I mean, luckily kids are probably dealing with this psychologically better than adults, because my son is super happy he doesn't have to go to school. That was initially he was happy, but now even I can see him get a little bit of boredom creeping up, a little bit of just being stir crazy. I can see it a little bit. I can even see his passion for going outside being less. It's almost like we're creating zombie people, because we're telling everybody stay inside, watch TV, and what Dr. Kendra Becker called eat your Corona snacks, and and just stay home. And I mean, America already had a obese problem of lazy people who just sat around and didn't exercise enough and get outside. And we're talking about, some people were talking about that before this epidemic, that like, hey, we need to get outside, you enjoy vitamin D, your body needs to stay healthy, and you can't just have a lifestyle where you sit down all day, then you go home and order takeout and watch TV, and you just continue doing that. Your body's designed to move, and it's at its best when it's moving and getting sunlight and being exposed to germs and bacteria and all this stuff. And now we're just like, lock yourself inside the house, and it just, and you're constantly sharing articles online, and a lot of times we're sharing a lot of the same stuff, and you get people who push back. You get people who are almost in denial because they've been brainwashed to believe that there's the government is doing this for the greater good. And it's like they don't either they're not familiar with history, or they have incredibly short-term memory. But it's like you're talking about.
It's like they've been in the coma for the last 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And.
It is dismaying to me that that people are inclined to trust the authorities after they've been lied on every important foreign policy. Well, not just foreign policy, even everything. For what? Like not 50 years more. Like every war, right? Every war it starts with a lie and a deception from the Spanish War, from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It always starts with a big lie. And so, like, if they're willing to lie to you about those things, like Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin, 50,000 U.S. soldiers died in Vietnam, and the war was started on a big lie about the Gulf of Tonkin. If they're willing to lie to you about those things, what makes you think that they're telling you the truth about the virus? I mean, this Dr. Anthony, what's his face? Anthony Fauci, is that?
Yeah, I always pronounce it wrong too. I don't know if it's Fauci. Yeah, I think it's Fauci.
Fauci, yeah, David. Yes. Anthony Fauci. I mean, like, he writes for the New England Journal of Medicine that the coronavirus will end up being like essentially.
Did I lose you?
Hello?
You back?
Yeah. I don't know. Where did it cut me off?
Well, we just figured out how to pronounce Dr. Fauci. Now I'm going to pronounce it wrong again. Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci writes very recently in the Journal of New England Journal of Medicine that the coronavirus will basically end up being like a flu season thing, with normal mortality rate at 0.1%. So one person in 1,000 infected will die, as with other flu viruses. And then 2 days later, he goes on TV and he continues advocating for total quarantining for until the end of April. So, I mean, like, obviously, there's plenty of reasons for people to question this. And one thing that because at some point in my life, I had some health issues that kind of drove me to do a lot of research. And one of the things, among others, that I ended up reading was Dr. Weston Price's book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And I have to say that of all the books I ever read in my whole life, that one is number one most important book I ever read, because it's absolutely excellent, authoritative, and very important. And most people in medicine not only haven't read it, but they haven't heard of it. And I asked. But basically, so, like the question of health, and I posted an article on my blog about this because I didn't want to be controversial. I didn't want to do anything conspiratorial. I just wanted to lay it out for people who want to read it in completely official, in official figures, by non-controversial principles, and to say, like, here's 3 very scary diseases: polio, tuberculosis, and malaria. And then I laid out how many people a year by World Health Organization figures, right? Not something I invented. How many people get infected every year in the world? How many people die? What is the percentage of mortality? And like polio is very scary to people because the effects are devastating, right? But what most people don't understand is that polio is a very, very, very infectious virus. It's very contagious, right? However, in 95% to 99% of infections, it gives no symptoms. So you could get the polio virus and have no effect. And for 95 to 99% of people, that is the case, no effect. And only one child in 1,000, so of 1,000 infections, only one child will develop paralysis because the virus will penetrate to the nervous system and will cause the paralysis, right? And so you have to ask yourself, so what is the difference between the 999 and the 1? And obviously, it has to be your immune system. So that 1 out of 1,000 will have had their immune system compromised, and as a result, they'll end up paralyzed, right? And so, as a parent or as a human being, what should your obsession be? Your obsession should be to keep your immune system strong, not to clamor for protection from authorities, to push your neighbors away, to walk around in a plastic bag with a mask and a plastic shield around yourself. It should be to keep your immune system strong and uncompromised. And there are some very, very common sense, non-controversial steps you can take to make sure of that, to get good quality nutrition, to get plenty of minerals and vitamins in your diet, preferably not from, supplements, to get adequate sleep, to get some exercise during your day, to avoid eating too much sugar and drinking alcohol, and normal things like washing your hands, which you should do anyway, and then live your life normally and without stress. And occasionally you're going to get a virus, and occasionally you're going to catch a cold and a flu, which happens all the time, right? But that's part of life. And so why should we be so hysterically frightened of this cold virus? Well, because they made us, they primed up people's fear. And when they prime up people's fear, it's to kind of preempt rational thinking and questioning because they are doing another agenda. And at the very minimum, they use this very highly hysterical, emotional moment to crash the economy and to orchestrate the biggest wealth transfer ever orchestrated in the history of mankind. What they just did with, the Fed's balance sheet going to 6 trillion and then them giving $420 billion to the big banks to shore them up. And so this is, without the fear, from this virus thing, this would never be able to be done. It wouldn't pass through Congress. A 4 trillion bailout. But as it is, it passed, and practically it was unanimous. So
Well, I agree with you. I mean, Weston Price is very influential to myself and many of the doctors and health and nutrition experts I've had on the show. And I always tell people when I do these health and nutrition shows how important those shows are to me, because people listening can hopefully get information to improve their quality of life immediately. You know, it's like we can talk about the market, we can talk about bigger pictures, geopolitical stuff, but it's like a lot of times people feel like, well, okay, that's good information, but it doesn't improve your life right now. I mean, it might improve your life in I guess, in regards to maybe having a better understanding of the world and how things work and history and that stuff. And so, but the health stuff, you can do stuff to improve your mood, improve your immune system, improve your energy levels, which will improve what? I mean, in result, it'll improve your relationship with your friends, your family, your kids, more energy and health to do the hobbies you enjoy, which will also bring you happiness, which will put you mentally in a better state of mind. I mean, all these things are so important. They're so intertwined. And,
they are spectacular. I mean, like I at the time when I started researching all this stuff, you know, my health was kind of like degenerating. I had this chronic inflammation situation. I was going to all kinds of different doctors and specialists to try to treat this. It was all absolutely useless, you know. They, like occasionally they would alleviate my symptoms temporarily, but none of them, not one, ever mentioned that it had anything to do with nutrition. And then when I discovered Weston Price and I read his book and I changed my diet, I mean, the effect was nothing short of spectacular. And in the space of about 2 or 3 weeks, I just could not believe it. I mean, like unfortunately, we don't have time. This could be like a topic for another 6 hours of discussion, but that is real and immediate. As you said, you know, like all this money and investing in jobs and this, you know, it's like a lifetime's occupation. But when you fix your health, the payoff is insanely spectacular and immediate. And then like your quality of life completely flips, because, you know, like so many things that you thought you couldn't do or you shouldn't do, or now suddenly you can do them and get away with it for free because your body is functioning correctly. And not only your body, your mind is functioning correctly, and you're feeling a lot happier for no reason, just because the insides are working as they were intended to.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's a mind and body connection that we forget about. You know, mentally, if you're in a good place, physically you feel better, and if physically you're in a good place, mentally you feel better. They both intertwine, you know. And I mean, they're even seeing, you know, a lot of people are now discussing gut health and how it's like your second brain and how it can affect your mood.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So so all that. I mean, how many people are probably in shitty moods just because they don't take care of their gut or and stuff like that? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They have no idea. They couldn't even conceive of that.
Yeah, I mean, our whole I mean, and it's funny because all this stuff is intertwining. When you were talking about the issues with capitalism and you know, infinite growth and the flaws in that, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we constantly give people pills instead of nutritional advice, and we don't, you know, and why functional medicine is now getting more popular. But for a long time, it was all just like, go to your doctor, he gives you a pill, it's symptom management. It's like, and Dr. Chris Kresser had a great little quote about this. He's like, you know, one of the problems is that if you have a rock in your shoe, the modern medicine system will tell you, here's a painkiller for that pain, and not tell you to take off the shoe and get rid of the rock. You know, they don't get to the root cause of the issue.
Right. Yeah. That's a good metaphor. I love it.
It is. Yeah. When I heard that, I've repeated it over and over again because it really is a great metaphor that explains what's going on. Like, so many people have arthritis, and it's amazing if you just remove the foods that cause inflammation, how much of that arthritis will go away. And inflammation is the cause of tons of different things, you know. So, you know, it really, again, I think you put it perfectly and beautifully when you said, you know, when you make these lifestyle changes in regards to eating and exercising and your health, what you get in return is beyond anything else that you can get. I mean, what's the point of having financial wealth if you feel like shit all the time, you know, or you're
exactly.
Yeah. So Yeah, that's all super, super important. I'm so glad we well, that's what I love about these long conversations. I always say to friends of mine and listeners how I love these long conversations, because you never know where eventually the conversations will lead. You kind of just keep talking, and eventually something interesting might be brought up an hour into the conversation that wouldn't have been brought up if you only had a 20-minute conversation. So it's
yeah.
Well, Alex, I don't want to take up much more of your time. We hit on so many different things, and I really, really love your perspective and your just outlook on life, and I mean, I love how you broke down. I'm going to have to probably re-listen to it, but broke down capitalism and socialism and your opinions and perspectives and the flaws of them both. I think a lot of listeners will really enjoy that part. But people who are listening who aren't familiar with some of your work or want to connect with you or keep up with some of your work, what's the best way of getting your book, your connecting with you, all your social media accounts?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I have I have a blog called The Naked Hedgie, one word, thenakedhedgie.com. And I have one book published on Amazon, the other book banned on Amazon, but it's available on a website called thethirdalliance.ch, and it's also available in paperback format from the Red Pill Press, the only publisher in the world who was brave enough to publish it. But the book is about the relationships between the United States and Russia. So that was not part of our conversation today, but another topic with some consequence for the future of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. What the heck was that?
Yeah, that was my phone receiving a message. I have to run out and pick up my children.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry for holding you up. Yeah. So send me those links to your blog and to where they can get your books and all that stuff, and I'll make sure to put them in the show description on our YouTube channel.
Okay, well, that's very kind.
Yeah. So that way people.
But not probably just now over the weekend, if that's okay.
What's that? Yeah. Over the weekend, whenever you get a chance. Yeah, no rush whatsoever. So thanks a lot, Alex. I really appreciate it. Just like our last time.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot, Ricky. With great pleasure.
Yeah, same here. We'll definitely have you on again, and let's do these from time to time. It sounds like we don't have a problem holding a conversation with each other.
No, it's cool. Excellent, Ricky. All the best. Have a good weekend, and we'll connect again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Take care.
Really appreciate the time. Take care. Bye.
Believe in the ripple effect.